Have you ever look at someone and just think, wow, they went all in on something.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, like they completely immersed themselves.
Absolutely.
And today we're actually diving into a text that kind of takes that idea like to a whole other level.
Okay.
Um, and they use the story of Marie Curie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you know, the Nobel Prize winner,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
famous one,
Yeah, the scientist.
as kind of a launch pad for their
Oh,
point.
interesting.
But forget like the usual like respectful biography stuff.
Yeah.
You know, where they just talk about, you know, all the great things that they did.
Right.
This source like kicks off with this really powerful image.
Okay.
Curie standing at a window, and the author describes her as like someone who knew the world would one day bow at her feet as ashes.
Whoa. Okay, so right away we're not getting a sentimental, like
Oh.
glorifying
Yeah, yeah.
tone
Oh,
here.
no, not at all.
There's like a darkness
Yeah.
underlying that.
Right. And I think that's what's so interesting about this source is like right off the bat, we're in for something a little unconventional.
Yeah.
And so today we're really going to dig into this author's take on like what it means to truly make an impact, to
Yeah.
really glow, if you will.
Yeah, I like that. To glow.
Yeah.
So not just succeed, but like really leave a mark.
Right.
And that opening image is just so striking.
Yeah.
It just throws you right into that kind of, yeah, that intensity. And, you know, it avoids any of the typical sentimentality.
Yeah.
It immediately positions her as this figure with this like formidable, almost inevitable destiny.
Yeah. And that focus on her future impact,
Right.
even if it might be a little bit destructive, is part of what sets this darkly humorous and thought-provoking tone for the whole piece.
Absolutely.
And it gets even more hands-on. Literally.
Uh,
The author just casually describes Curie picking up radium barehanded.
Whoa, wait, hold on. Barehanded.
Yeah.
Radium. Like
Wow.
the radioactive element?
Yeah, like no gloves, no tongs, no nothing.
Wow. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. And the author like responds to this in the text by being like, who picks up radioactive material like it's a Tamagotchi with ADHD?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You know, and I mean, you have to admit it's a pretty fair point.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of mindset does that even take?
What's so interesting about that, though, is it's not just the recklessness of it,
Right.
but it's also the apparent lack of fear
Yeah.
or like this complete absorption in her work that you have to kind of assume is there.
Yeah.
You know, it's like comparing it to a child's toy, I think really highlights that almost innocent but still incredibly dangerous fascination.
Right.
You know, and it really makes you wonder, like, what's the driving force?
Totally.
What's pushing her to do this?
And then there's this quote from Curie in the source. And it's
Yeah.
delivered almost like nonchalantly.
Okay.
Like she just says, it's just so pretty when it glows. You
You
know, and it's that fascination with the visual aspect
Sure.
of this like really potent thing
Right.
that really stands out to me.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't necessarily about all the scientific data at that moment, was it?
Yeah, it really seems like in that moment it wasn't a purely like intellectual or scientific
Yeah.
fascination.
Yeah.
It seems like something much deeper.
Yeah, like almost a visceral connection.
Yeah.
You know, and it suggests that she had this level of immersion in her work that went way beyond just objective observation.
Right.
Almost hinting at this deeper, maybe even obsessive relationship with her research.
Yeah, and what does that kind of focus, you know, what does that tell us about how to achieve groundbreaking work?
I mean, the author doesn't shy away from a strong interpretation, let's put it that way.
Okay.
They call her brilliantly mad.
Brilliantly bad.
And then they throw in this wild comparison.
Okay.
They're like, it's Breaking Bad, but French.
Breaking Bad, but French? What?
I know.
What do they even mean by that?
It's absurd.
Yeah.
But it also kind of paints this really vivid picture in your mind.
Yeah, I guess it does.
This intense dedication, this pushing boundaries, this like consequences be damned kind of attitude.
I mean, it definitely reframes Curie in a more like contemporary light.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what the author's trying to do here. They're trying to move her beyond that like pedestal of scientific sainthood,
Yeah.
you know, and show a more complex and maybe even flawed character
Mhm.
who is driven by this almost obsessive pursuit,
Right.
which kind of does sound a little bit like the protagonist in Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And I think that French element
Yeah.
just adds that little touch of like dark, ironic humor.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And speaking of dark and intense, her lab.
Oh, yeah. What about her lab?
I mean, forget pristine conditions, right? Like sterile lab coats.
Yeah.
This source calls it a freaking death ballet.
A death ballet. That's a pretty intense image.
I know, right?
So I'm guessing it wasn't exactly the most, the safest of work environments.
No, not at all. Like, apparently, while some people worry about moths getting in their clothes, Curie was storing uranium in her drawers.
Wait, in her drawers,
Yeah.
like with her clothes.
Well, I mean, the source doesn't specify, but
Why? Why would she do that?
because it glowed.
Of course.
That's the reason.
Because it glowed.
It all comes back to the glow.
Right, back to that fascination.
Yeah.
So even though it was obviously dangerous, she couldn't resist having it around.
Yeah, and I think this relentless attraction to the glow, despite the hazards,
Yeah.
really seems central to how the author is portraying her.
That's a really powerful image, though. This
Yeah.
death ballet, you know?
Yeah.
It suggests this sort of like macabre dance
Yeah.
with these really potent and dangerous elements. And
Yeah.
I mean, storing uranium in her drawers alongside like everyday items
Yeah.
really shows the extent to which her research permeated like every aspect of her life.
Yeah.
It's like this blurring of the lines between scientific pursuit and personal risk.
Right.
And I think that's really key to understanding her story.
Yeah. And then the author throws in this really like eclectic mix of other things that glow.
Okay.
They mentioned Chernobyl.
Chernobyl,
Yeah.
the nuclear disaster.
Mm-hmm. The U.S. Army
Okay.
and glow-in-the-dark slime.
Glow-in-the-dark slime, like the stuff you can buy online.
Yeah.
So we've got catastrophic events,
Yeah.
military power,
Right.
and kids' novelties.
Yeah.
That's a pretty bizarre spectrum.
It is. It's a really weird grouping.
So what's the connection?
Yeah, like what is the author trying to draw here by grouping all these things together?
Well, if we consider glowing as like a metaphor
Okay.
for impact or like a lasting presence,
Okay.
regardless of what that presence is,
Right.
the author seems to be highlighting the diverse ways in which something can leave a mark.
Right.
I mean, Chernobyl obviously left a devastating and long-lasting impact on the world.
Yeah.
The U.S. Army projects power and influence globally,
Yeah.
and even something as fleeting as glow-in-the-dark slime, it captures attention,
Right.
albeit on a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
But Curie's glow, that was her scientific contribution,
Yeah.
and she achieved it at a very significant personal cost.
Right.
I think it makes you think about the different kinds of glow that we strive for
Yeah.
and the potential consequences of that.
Yeah.
You know, what are we willing to sacrifice for that glow?
Totally. And that leads to the inevitable toll that this took on her.
Yeah.
The source puts it pretty bluntly.
Okay.
Her body slowly gave up.
Oh, wow.
And then they use this analogy of like a car being run on Coke.
Cook, like the soda
Yeah.
instead of gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty harsh image.
I know.
But I guess it kind of works.
Yeah.
It's like innovative in a really misguided way,
Yeah.
you know, but ultimately destructive.
Right.
And I think that's a really effective way to illustrate the self-destructive nature of her dedication.
Yeah. And that Coke analogy really hits hard because it highlights the fundamental incompatibility between her body
Mm-hmm.
and that constant radiation exposure.
Right.
Like she's putting something in that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And it's slowly breaking it down.
Right.
And it underscores that idea of this slow internal breakdown in the pursuit of progress.
I mean, it really forces us to consider the sacrifices people make,
Yeah.
you know, even for the most significant achievements.
Yeah. Okay, so we have this picture of Marie Curie, right?
Yeah.
This brilliant, almost reckless figure obsessed with this luminous element
Yeah.
to her own detriment.
Right.
And this is where the author really turns the tables.
Okay.
And they start speaking directly to you,
To me.
the listener,
Oh, okay.
with this rather colorful address.
Okay.
They call you Sweet Talking Stage Bunny.
Sweet talking stage bunny.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, it kind of catches you off guard,
It's
right?
a little strange,
Yeah, a little jarring.
but I guess it grabs your attention.
Yeah, and I think that's the point.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very intentional shift.
Yeah.
You know, the author is moving away from that historical example
Yeah.
and focusing on the listener's own aspirations.
Right.
And I think that term sweet talking stage bunny, as weird as it is,
Yeah.
it suggests a critique of superficiality
Okay.
or a kind of performance-oriented approach to creative work that lacks genuine depth.
Yeah.
It's designed to make you sit up and take notice.
Exactly. Because the author is saying that just like Curie was drawn to the glow of radium,
Hmm.
you in your own creative pursuits, you want your work to resonate.
Yeah.
You want it to make people think, wow, that hit me.
And who doesn't want that?
I mean, right. Like, who doesn't want to create something that has an impact?
Exactly.
But then the author immediately, like, throws cold water on that
Oh.
and says, if your poems sound like a houseplant's diary dripping with half-dead metaphors and romantic cliches,
Ouch.
yeah,
That's a pretty harsh critique.
you're not going to achieve that kind of resonance.
Yeah, but it's such a vivid image, though.
It is.
It really gets the point across.
Yeah.
So it's this contrast between the intensity of Curie's work
Right.
and what they see as the blandness of some creative expression.
Yeah.
This houseplant's diary,
Yeah.
it evokes this sense of like passive, uninspired introspection
Right.
that just doesn't connect with anyone.
Yeah.
So it raises the question, what distinguishes truly impactful work?
Yeah. What makes it stand out?
Yeah.
And then the author does this really interesting reframing.
Okay.
They're like, your stage, your interrogation room.
Your stage, your interrogation room. Okay, so it's not just about expressing yourself.
Right.
It's about actively engaging the audience.
Yeah.
Challenging them, even. I like that.
And the author says, from now on, you ask the questions.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So it's a shift in power.
It's a total power dynamic shift.
So what's the thinking behind this confrontational approach?
I think the author is advocating for a much more assertive form of creative expression.
Okay.
Like moving away from just sharing your personal feelings and towards this more direct engagement.
Okay.
Where you're making the audience think.
Right.
And maybe even feel a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the emphasis on asking the questions really shows that the author wants you to provoke thought,
Yeah.
to challenge assumptions.
Instead of just seeking validation.
Exactly.
Okay.
I like where this is going.
And to really drive this point home, the source provides these wonderfully sharp examples
Okay, let's hear them.
of the kinds of questions you should be posing.
Okay.
So one of them is, why did you leave when I dropped the knife?
Whoa, okay.
Another one is, why did you love me when you had no idea who I was?
Okay. Getting pretty intense.
And then this one really stands out.
Okay.
Why are your promises quieter than your orgasm in a hotel with my brother?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, those are some seriously direct
Yeah.
and confrontational questions. Not exactly your typical, like, hey, let's all get together and share our feelings kind of poetry.
Yeah. Not exactly coffee shop open mic material.
Right.
But I mean, they're effective.
Yeah.
They make you stop and think.
Yeah. And the author's reaction to these examples is equally enthusiastic.
Okay.
They're like, ouch. Good. It should sting.
It should sting.
Yeah.
So they're not shying away from the discomfort.
Bro.
In fact, they're embracing it.
Yeah. And then they give these incredibly vivid and honestly quite unpleasant comparisons for that sting.
Okay, like what?
Like raw chicken in a hot car.
Go. Okay.
They talk about sex with your parents.
Oh, God, yeah.
A clown on your balcony at 3 a.m.
Okay, those are all really specific and kind of disturbing.
I know, but they evoke a very particular type of unease.
Yeah, and I think that's the point.
Right.
They're supposed to be unsettling.
Yeah.
Because the author is saying that impactful work shouldn't be comfortable or easy to digest.
Right.
It should make you react,
Yeah.
challenge you.
And leave a lasting impression.
Yeah.
Even if that impression is one of discomfort.
Exactly. It's about making a statement.
So bringing it back to Marie Curie,
Yeah.
what did she fundamentally understand?
Okay.
That maybe these creators of houseplant diaries are missing.
Right.
And the author boils it down to this. Only those who are willing to self-destruct can create something powerful.
That's a pretty extreme statement,
It is.
but I don't think they're talking about literal self-harm.
No.
So what do they mean?
I think it's more about this willingness to push boundaries,
Okay.
to take risks, to expose raw, uncomfortable truths in your work,
Yeah.
even if it means challenging conventions or facing criticism.
All right, because Curie literally destroyed herself
Right.
through radiation exposure. So
Yeah.
it's like a metaphor.
Exactly. It's a metaphor for that uncompromising dedication
Yeah.
to your pursuit.
Okay, so it's about going all in,
Yeah.
even if it's risky.
Even if it's dangerous, even if it costs you something.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's how you create something truly powerful.
And the author doesn't frame Curie's death as a tragedy. Instead, they call it a beacon, a neon finger shoved into the socket of truth.
Whoa. That's,
It's a lot, right?
yeah.
But I think it really drives home this idea that her extreme dedication,
Yeah.
her willingness to go all in,
Yeah.
ultimately led to profound discovery
Right.
and a lasting impact on the world.
And I think that imagery of the neon finger in the socket,
Yeah.
as violent as it is,
Yeah.
it also represents this sudden burst of understanding
Yeah.
that comes from pushing limits.
Exactly. And then the author issues this very direct challenge
To me.
to the listener, to you.
Okay, hit me with it.
Will you write poems that slap people in the soul?
Okay.
Or will you keep whimpering on stage like a soggy hamster at a mindfulness retreat?
Okay, first of all, soggy hamster is a phrase I did not expect to hear today.
I know, right?
But I get it.
It's pretty stark contrast.
Yeah,
It's impactful versus ineffectual.
exactly. And I think the mindfulness retreat part is a little dig
Oh, yeah, for sure.
at what the author sees as overly gentle or maybe inward-focused art.
Yeah, like art that's afraid to make a statement.
Yeah. So if you're ready to maybe dial down the soggy hamster vibes,
Yeah, how do I do that?
the author has a solution.
Okay, listening.
A book.
A book.
Yeah.
What's it called?
It's called The Poetry Master,
The Poetry Master. Okay.
which they call the radioactive guide to stage chaos.
Radioactive Guide to Stage Chaos?
Yeah, given everything we've talked about so far,
Yeah.
seems pretty fitting.
Yeah, it tracks.
And this is not your typical, like, oh, here's some gentle encouragement to help you become a better writer kind of book.
Okay.
This is like hardcore.
So what does it teach you?
It teaches you how to turn your writing into an interrogation,
Okay.
how to destroy with a smile.
Destroy with a smile. That sounds a little ominous.
Yeah, it's a little intense.
But I'm intrigued.
How to use stylistic devices with the precision of, and I quote, serial killers use gloves.
Whoa. Okay, now that's a comparison I was not expecting.
I know, right?
Serial killers and poetry.
But it emphasizes that level of control and precision.
Yeah, right.
Like every word is a weapon.
Exactly. And the book also teaches you how to deliver one line that can shatter someone's entire belief system,
Okay.
and how to craft poems that hit harder than a Netflix season finale.
So it's about impact.
Yeah.
It's about leaving a mark.
Yeah, big time.
I mean, the language is definitely extreme.
Yeah.
It's meant to be provocative,
For sure.
but it also kind of brings it back to this idea of storytelling.
Right.
Like a Netflix season finale, you want people on the edge of their seats.
Exactly.
You want them to be talking about it afterward.
Yeah, this is not some like cozy, let's all sit around a campfire and share a poetry kind of guide.
Right.
This is like poetic warfare.
Poetic warfare. I like that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all about understanding that your tongue is a weapon and learning how to wield it effectively.
So you're saying I need to weaponize my poetry?
Maybe. I mean, are you ready to embrace your inner poetic agent of chaos?
That's a good question. I might need to think about that.
Well, if you are, the author's got you covered. They provided website links.
Oh, nice.
One specifically for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and another for the rest of the world.
Perfect. So anyone listening can check it out.
Exactly. And the author ends with this final encouragement. Don't do it for me. Don't do it for Marie. Do it because you've always known your tongue is a weapon. Time to learn how to use it.
I mean, that's a really powerful way to wrap things up.
It is.
It brings the focus back to the listener
Yeah.
and empowers them
Yeah.
to use their voice in a more impactful way.
And that recurring theme of glowing,
Right.
now linked to language.
Yeah.
It really leaves a lasting impression.
It does.
So to recap this rather explosive deep dive, we started with Marie Curie's almost self-destructive dedication to science.
Right.
And we ended with this author's argument for a raw, unflinching, even confrontational approach to creative expression.
Exact.
And the core message seems to be that to truly make your work resonate, you need to be willing to step outside your comfort zone
Yeah.
and maybe embrace a little bit of that brilliant madness.
Right, because the author used Curie's extreme example
Yeah.
to challenge us to think about the intensity
Yeah.
and the intent behind our own creative endeavors. So are you aiming for just a flicker of recognition?
Right.
Or are you ready to create something powerful, something that
Yeah.
maybe even has a little bit of that radioactive glow?
On that note, we leave you with the author's final sign-off. Stay creative, Stefan.
Stay creative, everyone.
Until our next deep dive, keep those creative sparks flying and maybe think twice before picking up anything that glows without knowing what it is.
Good advice.